Leslie Carabello. I'm a nurse by trade. I was the public health nurse for the town of Danvers for about 10 years. Left in about 2007, and my office there was at the senior center. So I have some long-time roots at a senior center. Been a nurse since 1992. Worked in various areas, but in genealogy, also known as family history. I guess I was smitten with the bug, I call it, when I was 15 years old, when I went to Essex with my sister to look up the Burnham history, and we found down in their cellar a whole Burnham book about our family history, and from then on it was just what I call is my heroin. Genealogy and chocolate. That's my thing. I've been doing it for quite a long time. For personal reasons, but then I became the director at the Family History Center over in Lynnfield at the public library. Well, it's not the public library, it's at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but the library is open for genealogy. I've presented plenty of times, and I help individuals as well. I've completed the certificate program at Brigham Young University, which was about 12 courses over about 5 years at the time. And so, again, it's been a wealth of knowledge to learn that everyone thought everything was online, so it's been quite enlightening to enlighten people to tell them things are still not always online. There is more coming, which is great, but still sometimes you have to go into the records. You have to look at the cemeteries, go into town halls. So my goal today is to do kind of an introduction, but opening up some of the browsers to really show you some of the records. Sometimes having those visual things, I think they work better in teaching as opposed to just a lecture kind of format. So, apologize for it's kind of dark. At last minute adjustment, somehow made all my slides kind of dark. So, and if someone can't hear me, let me know. I've never been accused of being soft-spoken, ever. Okay, so what are vital records? Vital records are really considered records that are kept usually from the towns or cities. And then there's religious records. Before vital records were required by towns, or even before they were required, it's church records. Religious records were the records to document the events in people's lives. Most of it started as marriage records, but with time, death, burial, birth, christenings, and whatnot included all that. So in birth records, rather than the vital records, they're usually kept in town halls or city halls. In churches, it's considered the baptisms or the christenings. In marriage, you have them usually in towns and churches. Death records are usually found in town halls, city halls, although you can find them in some church records. Burials are usually you find in the church records. Let's see, and vital records really started around the colonial time, actually pre-colonial time, beginning about 1538. After the separation of the British Church from the Church of Rome, it was required that ministers start keeping the records of all the christenings, the marriages, the burials in the parishes. They included like the civil and non-civil, and eventually that split, and towns and governments required the governments to have copies of those. So very often the parishes would have to make 2 copies of everything, one for their records and one for their town or their region. So this is an example of like a birth record. Up at the top, I don't have a link for this one, but other ones I do. These are what we call the common genealogical records. Up at the top, it's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So this is a record kept, and it's a government record. It doesn't say on the left, it usually says place of birth in the county or the borough in the city. In this particular one, this does not have it. Not that uncommon, actually. But it's a 1912 birth record, but what's great about this, obviously it has the date of the birth, and then it also has the child's first name, and then you also have the parents, and usually the parents' place of birth. So you get a lot of information from one little record, because then you can then start the next generation back. So if you start with a child being born, and now they give the parents Now you can look up the parent's name and you're looking for their marriage. So it's always good to start with the most recent event. Some people like to start with their great-grandfather or grandmother, and it's so much harder. It's kind of like dropping a stone in the middle of a lake to try to search what it is. It's better to start with you. Write down information about you or your children and start there, and then work your way back. Go to your parents and then so forth. It's always better to start the most recent. So this record was created at the time of the event. And that's an important piece of information, because you find when events are recorded many years later, such as a death certificate, that sometimes the information is wrong. Not that they weren't wrong about when they died, but usually you can find a birth date on a death record. And so you have to keep in mind, like, why doesn't that match with like some other documents that might come up and have a different birth record date. So keep that in mind. The closest of the event that was recorded, the more accurate it is. So in here you have the mother's name and her maiden name, which is Maria Contina, and the father is Vincenzo Spinato. Now, knowing I've done Ireland, I've done a ton of Italian, and I've looked at other records as well. When immigrants came over, not uncommon that they changed their name, or in some way they, like when there was persecution for Irish, for Italians and others, they changed their name so it didn't sound so Irish or it didn't sound so Italian. So you get a lot of variations. I find this especially true for Jewish records, those coming over from Yugoslavia and Russia and Prussia, and Jewish records in general, that the names have changed considerably. So which can be kind of discouraging, but the further back you go, a little harder it gets, but just know you don't take one piece of information for like, that's the absolute truth. You like to kind of cross over and look at other information to make sure this is your Maria Contina, this is your Vincenzo Spinato. Knowing how parents would name children, and I'm sure it's like this for, besides the Italian. So the first son born was always named after the father's father. The first female child born was named after the father's mother. Then the second son, the mother's father would get it. You see where I'm going? So it's almost like every other generation, it's Giovanni, or Vincenzo. So you're seeing a lot of the same names over and over again. And then when they're in America, Giovanni is John, and Giuseppe is Joseph. There you go. We have a few in there. Okay. So know that they're going to see the Joe, the Joseph, and the Giovanni, the Vincenzo. You're going to see a variation, Americanized, as well as not. So you get the colors of the child is white. They were born, or the parents were born in Corona, Messina, Italy, which is wonderful. Instead of just writing Italy, you have a starting point now of where to look for the child's parents. Oh, they're actually not just from Messina, but from Corona, which is a little town there. And then you get the occupation up here, which is great. But back then, this is, what did I say, 1912. The father is a laborer and the mother is a housekeeper, not uncommon. Let's see, and then you get the age of the parents. So you can see the mother was 22 when the child was born and the father was 35. So what's great about this piece of information is that now you can do math. 1912 minus 22, now you get that estimated year of when, oh, the mother was probably born about, and you do that math, which is what, 1890-ish, and so forth. So it's great, it allows you to jump kind of quickly to where you want to go. You want to go to Corona, Italy, in the 1890s or even further back, because both were born there, to start looking at other records. All right, well, actually, this is church record, but this is a baptismal record. And so this one is listed, say it says Register of Baptisms. So what they would do for this, someone would go back, because it all has the same handwriting. That means someone went in, looked at all those individual baptismal records of each one of these, then went and made a register of it. So they're writing, oh, they were born like, but you can, they're these might be alphabetical in this case, because we're talking 1904, but they give you when they were born, but then when they were baptized. Oh no, it's based on the baptismal date, you know, the year, 1904. But, so what can happen here, that's for me, I'm looking at the handwriting. This is someone who's copied information from an original document. So that tells me, what if they can't read the original handwriting? So I always take this like, okay, what if there's spelling errors in here? Not uncommon, because again, someone's looking at another record and figuring out, like trying to figure out what the date is and what the spelling is. Not so hard of the date, but certainly of the spelling. But it's great, you have the parent's name, you just have the child, the parent's name, when they were born and when they were baptized. Very basic. And this is, again, a register of baptisms. This is a christening back in 1831. I chose this because I love the handwriting. It's just amazing. And it talks about James as the son of Richard, and that they actually give the maiden name Elizabeth Ackwell. He is a Chase-side, I don't know what that is, but I tend to transcribe exactly what is written, but it says he's a shoemaker. And it says when they were fully baptized. So sometimes you just see this. So you can see the christenings in August. And it's, you know, in August of 1830. And not 1831, I misspelled there. But you get a little bit information there. So this would be good if they actually, in the county or the town, if they had another birth record, that then you can coordinate. You can look at the two and say, oh, there's the baptism record, and it looks the same basically as the birth record. It has the same parents, names, and the child's. So marriage records. Marriage records, they were legal marriage ceremonies. They could be performed by any authorized church person, a military, or a government official. So that's why you can usually see these the church and the government kept these records. I'm going to pull this up because it's harder to see, and I have the links down here. We have two different ones. Let's see. Oh, don't tell me we have a...
We don't personally give them, but we have kits here. You're welcome to. Oh, sure, absolutely.
I don't know.
It's like me on the computer.
Did we ask that guy to stay here?
He's at town hall, so he can't come back.
Is your router?
No. I wouldn't do that yet.
All right.
No, it looks like it's blank. I can't even, hold on.
4 o'clock, 8 to 4, Monday to Thursday.
Do you have a battery?
Nope, that's not it, because it's showing up here. See if I can pull it up.
There you go.
That is so weird. Okay, I hope this doesn't mean all my links are going to be screwed. I mean, see. Yeah, no, I was trying to get the link.
There you go.
I want the actual open up. Let's see if we can do it this way. It might be that just the connection. Here it is. Yeah, so I must have to toggle back and forth. Okay. Oh. Here you go.
There you go.
So thank you. So this is the state of Florida. So this is so it's a government record, and it tells us what county it's in here. Let's do this. Okay. And it tells us, yeah, exactly that Mr. William Stewart Wallace and Susie Dorch Wilson, she's from Osceola, yeah, Osceola, I can never say that. That they're there to get married, and they actually have witnesses here. So witnesses are often family members that are there. So they're like another key piece of information. And it says that, and the seal was at the courthouse in Kissimmee, which is the city, on the 10th of April, 1890. Where is it? So you can see where it says the 10th, so they went to be married. Sometimes you go there to get a marriage certificate. I mean, like to register to be married. And then sometimes a later date is when they actually married. Here it's on the same date. So the judge is saying, or the minister down here is saying, minister of the gospel, that he married them. So this is a government record that you also have the minister's handwriting here, down here, that he performed the marriage, and then you have here, it was registered, filed on this record the very next day by the judge. So here you have kind of a crossover between the two. All right, let's see if we can get back without totally messing up things. All right. Good. All right, so that was this one over here. Over here, this is a little bit different. Didn't pull quite out. Well, I'm not going to mess around and figure out what that is. That's the one of those ancestors here. So it says in 1899, this over here is Frank Hooven, and it says where he is living. He's from Pennsylvania or Philadelphia. He's 28. He's white. He's single. So this tells us he wasn't married before. This is in his second marriage. So he's single. He's a home painter. And then his father's name is Thomas J. Hooven, which you get here as well. And then you have the bride, which is, I think that's Margaret Ware. It's her first marriage. It gives her how old she is, both her parents. She's single. Again, she's not married before. And it gives, down here a little bit more information. So it's great on these. I find government records tend to have more information on there. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. This is another certificate of marriage. Let's see if we can bring this up without totally posing. Only because it's so much easier to see instead of for those especially in the back. This is typed, so this is 1923. This is one of my ancestors. But it gives you the full name of the bride and the groom. The time of the marriage, she was living in Danvers, again, first marriage. I love these kind of documents and so many others that really give a glimpse into what they did. He was a leather worker. And you see this a lot in census records, which we'll go through. But it's so great to see on marriage records what people did, which this would be tough these days to find someone who worked in the leather industry. She worked as a clerk, and again, there's both the parents' names down here, and the certificate when it was issued, and the clerk, all this. So it tells us a lot of information here, and then especially here, oh wait, is this the, yeah. So this was the clergy who married him. So he's attesting. So sometimes in records you can actually look up a specific clergy name to say like, oh, my family all got married in that Presbyterian church by Reverend Brown. But sometimes you can't find the records because sometimes they're sporadic. So a lot of times you can go in and search a certain way. You can find the records for a particular clergyman, which is very helpful. All right, let's see. Let's do this. Okay. This one is in London. Again, I didn't do this one. So this is a church record. See, it says up here, up the top, marriage was solemnized in the All Saints Church, and it gives you the location in the county of Surrey. Yeah. When married, it's very brief. It's more of a register, which is very common way back then. It was 1884. So you have the names, their ages. So spinster really means someone single. It's kind of sad, that was only applied to women. For guys, it wasn't. It was always women were spinsters. And I just thought, oh my gosh, they're so old at 22, really? Oh my gosh, no. It was just, that's what they used for single. Let's see, residents, they tell exactly where they were living, and the parent's name, and what cab proprietor, the other one is a waiter, and the witnesses who solemnized the wedding, which is great. All right, death records. So death records are, again, a vital record is considered at town or city hall. You get a lot of great information from here as well. You get the name, which is Catherine Hooven. She was female, she was white, she was actually single. And you can see here, the link didn't transfer over. So she was, cause of death here was hemorrhagic form of the, hemorrhagic from the internal carotid. And the other one was, had to do with an operation. So this person was, is this the one that was like 19 days old?
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
this one was very, very young, just months. And then somehow they had to do an operation on her internal carotid and she bled to death. So, which is really sad. And we understand back in, this far back in 1906 or, yeah, that the mortality and compared to these days, I mean, maternal mortality was really high back then, but certainly from medical procedures. They just didn't have the knowledge that we know now. They can't use ultrasound. They didn't have it back then to guide where their needle is going or whatever, so it was sad. And sometimes, even if they're doing surgery in a closed location, there's still that chance. So kind of sad this child was, died from an operation. But it gives you, again, more information about the mother, the father, where they were living, whatnot. So, oh, this one's the Nova Scotia. So these are in 1865. Let's see, do this.
Nova Scotia.
Yeah. What a place. Okay. Let's get this down.
New Scotland.
Yeah.
That's what it stands for.
Nova
Nova Scotia. New
New
Scotland.
Scotland. Yeah. It's amazing to read the history. What went on. So you can see this is a registry of deaths. Now let me learn even more. So this is someone that, registered in registered, I think it was 1865.
This was the one.
But you have all the same handwriting, same person's writing this down. Notice the age. Look, 6 months, 55, 51 month. Here, infant. Married maybe? Infant. This might be spinster, because of course 18 is really old, right? Child at 5. Child. Youth. It's really sad to see way back, infant again, and where they were at. What's this one? So then when you go over here, this is my ancestors. I have ancestors, sorry, I don't want to make you dizzy while trying to follow. All right, so it gives us up here the date, date and place of birth. So it's really Tuscot, Nova Scotia, Yarmouth. And here you have the cause of death, inflammation of the lungs. Pneumonia, this was March, or it says November, I think it is, yeah. So we didn't have antibiotics back then to treat general pneumonia. So if someone gets pneumonia, it's really tough. And here, some of these other ones, this says, this is diarrhea. I think this is what it is. It's just spelled a little weird. Epilepsy, gastric fever, inflammation of the bowels, disease, I think this is lung, this is diarrhea again, typhoid for fever, debilitating dysentery, yeah, pulmonary congestion, consumption, you can see that. Child bed. That could be, you know, like a SIDS. So this I thought was kind of an eye-opener, and this was when I did my research, looking through so many of these, and those before the 1900s, it was quite sad to see how many children died. Yeah. So over here, let me see, I think this is when it was documented. Rare registered, yeah, so when it was registered. So it's kind of sad. Learning, wherever you're going to do your research, learning more about the penmanship, the handwriting back then really does help. Because you can see that diarrhea, that was a funky D, but when I look at a bunch of other ones,
Looks like a
that
snake.
it's, I know, it looks like a P, really. But having looked through a bunch of these records and understanding, like when you come upon this, you look at other records that are around, like, oh, does this look like other ones in the record? Does he write, like, this is Yarmouth, this is his Y, which is kind of clear. But it helps you to decipher the information on the record. All right. Let's see. Oh, I don't know why it's doing that. Probably because this is an undertaker's certificate.
7 months old.
Yeah, 7 months old. Pulmonary tuberculosis and bronchial pneumonia. Again, we're looking at an early,
Holy Cross Cemetery.
yeah, Holy Cross. This is 1904, again. That was, you should, yeah, as you can imagine, you know, when the first pandemic hit in 17, each year, remember the flu that hit Fort Devens, and then from then on. So that, having been a public health nurse, I researched it. So when that came back another year, it was more virulent, it was more deadly. So the first year when that pandemic hit, it killed people, but it was kind of a deadly one, but it wasn't nearly as deadly as it circulated the next year. It came where you sometimes died within 3 to 4 days. Because the virus was able to adapt and it mutated. And then it was, I mean, we've had it's just, they say it's really underestimated how many people died then. But here you get information about where the child's actually buried at Holy Cross Cemetery. It's in Philadelphia. Well, actually, I think this one's in Yeadon, Pennsylvania, which isn't that far from here, from there. But it gives us, again, the birthplace of Italy for both the parents. And again, it's the undertakers. It's another form of a death record. Burial records. These are, I'm going to open up the link here. So these are on just lined paper that they wrote that on. So let's see, let's get this, so make it easier to see. Yeah. So here you go. It's written on a piece of paper, and so someone who wrote this, and it was stamped here, and this is what I believe someone, because it's not like they have perforated lines back in the early 1900s. So I believe this was written in 1965. Was the stamp? So someone is going through this when writing. Sorry. Thought I put that on mute. So you have the names, but you have the full transcription of like a cemetery. It tells you lot 13, who is there, and they give you these actual birth dates to death dates. So these are really helpful too, because it gives you all that information. And you get the full name, and it tells you exactly where it is. Lot 14, here you have children of William, so you get a bunch of information from here too. This is another, this was just a copy to make it bigger, the burial record. Gravestones. This is, I mean, it's great because way back, well, sometimes you get it now, but especially back then, they would have a family plot. and you often could find the entire family there, or at least a portion of the family, the immediate family. And so when I was looking up my ancestors, my husband's ancestors, come to find out they had this beautiful Diorio, this incredible gravestone marker. But then not far from here, and amongst the other ones, you have these other ones over here that give you all the family members. I mean, this gives a wealth of information. But again, knowing how Italians name their children, that I'm going to be careful and back whatever records up here with other things. Because again, Vincenzo, Maria, how many Marias are there in Italy back then? So, got to be careful, but there's a tremendous amount of information. Also, what tells us, it gives you some clues, is that when the grave was actually made, or the tombstone, excuse me, is by looking at the art around there. And there's all classes you can take to try to date. If you can't see the date on there because it's so old, it's 300 years old in some cases, looking at the inscriptions on the gravestones can help say, okay, and then learning like how can you date those gravestones. And does mean something. Those, when they picked angels or they picked certain art to put on there, it meant something for that person. It wasn't just it was a pretty angel or a frog they put on there. It was for a specific reason. So there's lots of internet online checking of gravestones, these being two of them. So this is interment, and then this is find a grave here, which is where that's Holy Cross Cemetery right there that you can look on there. Again, it's only as accurate as the who put the information on there. So remember, if you find the birth date on a gravestone, that you got to realize that that's now put there 90 years or 80 years after the birth. So again, using multiple records to verify that's your guy or that's your girl. Oh, census records. These are the best things to putting together a story. I love them. Every 10 years, since 1790, the government has required a population census. Now, there are different kinds of census records. Let's see. There's so many of these. So it's great because you can follow a family over time to find out where they moved. They're free. You can get them, Family Search, and I'll go over that, but the National Archives Records Administration is the only place that's population census records are allowed to keep there. We have the Census Bureau, but all records are kept at what's NARA, the National Records Administration Building. So you can determine family relationships on a census record. You can find clues about where else to look of where they might have lived. There's also non-population ones. So there's agricultural census records. So if your family, your ancestor, owned a farm with like 7 cows and all this, there's an agricultural census record that will list all that, and list everything they had. There's actually a defective schedule for adults, children that were considered defective. They actually have a schedule for that. Indian schedules, manufacturing or industrial schedules, merchant seamen, there's census records for that. Military and naval forces, mortality schedules, slave schedules, veteran schedules, all those. U.S. Census ones, there's the church census, there's colonial, federal ones, which are the ones I'm going to key on, about every 10 years. State census tend to do it on the half year. So if 1910, you generally would see a state census at 1915, and then the federal one at 1920 again. Unfortunately, not all states started at the same time, so sometimes they can really be like they didn't start until like 1930. They would not. So I find it kind of difficult sometimes to find out, well, the person, your ancestor was on the 1910 and then disappeared. Like you can't find them anywhere else. Those state censuses are so important. But luckily, there's so many other ones. There's like maps and taxation census records. There's directories. All those are very helpful. Putting the pieces together. So I'm choosing, this is one of my husband's side, putting together all these census records. So this is Giovanni, which is a John. Carabello. He was born like in here. I have it for the other ones. So what's great on these census records, you can also look, families tend to live close by each other, especially the ones that immigrated from another country. So you would look on this whole page, you would look on the before and the after, because they're listed by street, that you could easily find a family member or distant relative or whatever that are living in the same community close by. And I found like on this, there are Italians tend to be living close together, and then Irish tend to be living close together in the same area of a city. So this is in Pennsylvania, and so Giovanni is listed here at this time. He was born, it says, and so the 1900 gives the month and the year, which is wonderful. The rest of the censuses generally don't do that at all. So it gives us July 1871. Here he's 28 years old. And it asks you, how long have you been in the country? He's been in the country 9 months. And he's been married how long? 4 years. So am I looking for his wife? Is his wife here too? Which I looked and she's not. Very common immigrants, the guys came over, they worked for a while, saved money and sent the money home to then get their family over here. So here he's a boarder. So he's staying with this household that actually ends up having many, many people living there. But he's married 4 years. And also living at the time is his brother, Biagio. He's a boarder, tells us he was born December 1875. He's 24, and he's been in the country only less than a year. And they're all laborers. So when you, I'll get to that in a minute. So this is him kind of breaking it down. So putting the pieces together. I'm going to focus on Giovanni. So in 1900, he's a laborer. And he's from Italy, and here see the columns 13 and 14. That says where you were born, Italy. Where was your father born? Italy. Where was your mother born? Italy. Okay? And so it also asks when did you, I think it's when you came over. I think it is, so it's in this case, 1899. He's like about 9 months. I think that's what that one is. So 1910, we're jumping to him. Here's Giovanni again. Now he's the head of the household. So he's head, which means here's Maria, his wife. So between 1900 and 1910, when the next census, his family came over. His wife came over. So that clues for me, I'm going to start looking for ship passenger lists that she's on. Because I have a 10-year gap here of where I'm going to start looking. So Giovanni he's the head of the household. It tells us he's 39, she's 32. And here it says in the middle, it says 4 and 3. How many children have you had? How many are alive? So somewhere she lost a child. I don't know where, but they're just saying at this time point, she has 3 alive. And then when she goes over, it says Southern Italian. So now I know I'm looking, if I didn't know already, I'm looking in the southern region of Italy for this particular one. So him, way over here, it says he's laborer. And it says, what does that say? Oh, railroad company. Railroad companies kept an amazing amount of records. You can get so much information from there. So this will help direct me like, oh, because the railroad was expanding back then. They used a lot of immigrant help to get the railroad built. A lot of our ancestors' backs are really holding up the rest of America as they were laborers for the incredible growth that the United States had. So it tells me he's working in a railroad. Jumping to 1920, he's now using the American form of Giovanni, which is John. He's the head of the household. And here, jumping back here, we have Maria the wife, Biagio, which is Benny for the son, Natal, which is the son, and Frank is the son. And it tells us how old they are over there as well. And over here, that tells us where they were born. The last 2 kids were born in Pennsylvania. Great, now I know where to start to look for their birth records. So jumping here, again, head of household, he's now 48, which the census records are writing down based on what you're telling them. So can there be errors? Yeah, absolutely there can be, for various reasons. But here, sometimes when I've done the math between, I'm like, oh, that can't be the right one, because there's such a discrepancy. It's about putting all the pieces together to kind of like what makes sense. So anyway, so John is 48, and it's asking, in this particular one, it says 1899, wants to know when they immigrated. Immigrated is that way of people coming over to America. It doesn't mean you're a citizen. When did you come over here? 1899. And here, next to it, it says PA. It says they want to know when he was naturalized. That really should be, I think it's NA. He was naturalized in 1918. Oh, great, great. And so now I'm looking for some naturalization records that give us a lot more information. When did they become a citizen? For people to become citizens for the longest time, you first had to come over, you had to live over here a certain amount of time, and then you had to declare after about a year. It's usually about 5-year gap mark before they were allowed to become citizens, because they had to be over here a certain amount of time and then declare they wanted to be a citizen. So you're not just looking in 1 year, you're looking for like, upwards to 5 years. So in his case, he says, in 1918, I was a citizen. Here, he's a barber. First, he's a railroad guy, he's a barber. But this makes sense to me, and I'll tell you in the next slide. And he's a barber, and he's working at home. So here's Mary, the wife. That's Maria. The wife tells us again, she's an alien. AL over here is an alien. She's not naturalized yet. But she's 42 when she came over in 1901. Here's Benjamin, Chris, which is usually a Natal, and Frank. So we have the same ones. So here we can trace the family. And one is here. So Benny is working in a pasta factory. A lot of what we do in our whole United States are built upon the work that the immigrants had. When I've looked into Pennsylvania down there were like 42 different factories for clothing and related. Making pasta, all that kind of things. That Pennsylvania was such a hub of immigration, as was Boston was. Louisiana was another one, where we can find so many of our immigrant ancestors coming through these ports. Okay, jumping to 1930, here's Giovanni, now John, tells us a little bit more. His house, I think that's his house, that he's like $6,000. He is naturalized. NA means he's naturalized. So in 1930, when you're naturalized, that means I've gone the government route and I've taken my oath, I've done all that. So now I'm going to be looking for some other information about that. Says he's a barber, again. Okay. Mary, his wife, tells us she's not working, but Charlie, the son, who's 20, he's a foreman at a hat factory. Again, Pennsylvania was like a hub of clothing industry, of so many things, just like Lowell was for so many immigrants. This person, he's 20, working at a hat factory. I think I might have had it line. So here's Grace. John is only 6, so I might have had it offline. Grace, because many of those ended up working in those factories. Jumping to 1940, here's John again, Giovanni, tells us their age right here, just like the other ones did. Where they were born in Italy, the penmanship's much better by the time you get to the 1940 census. Tells us he's a barber, and he owns his own business here. So he's been doing this, now 20 plus years. And here you talk about, usually you'll see the older kids have moved out. So here you see Mary's living here still. She's still an alien. It says AL over here. So above, he says he's naturalized. He's taken the oath. She is still an alien, not an American citizen yet. Grace is the daughter, tells us she's single at 25. She was born in Pennsylvania. She's a clerk, and she works at a hosiery office. And here's Charlie, the son, who's 29. He's a physician here, and he owns his own practice. What a great thing to have, like this particular family. They had some incredible hard work, put a couple physicians through. Oops, wait, I want to go back. So the other one, can I go back on that? Well, I'll just say here. The one who was a barber, he was in the newspapers, because from here, there were so many newspaper clippings, newspapers.com, is part of the many subscriptions that I have, so I can find the old newspapers that say so much about his life. He ends up being the oldest barber in the nation, cutting hair at 95 back then. I don't know if I'd want him to touch my hair, but he was cutting hair at his own barber shop. He had one at home, and then I was able to find he had, a legit one. So for so many years, he was a barber. He had his own company. He was the oldest one. It was really like an amazing thing to see. He came over in the boat, and eventually I find the passenger list of the boat he was on. And then he comes over, how he worked on the railroad, he worked in various things, and then he became a barber. And how did he learn that? I don't know, something I still have to learn. And then for years, for decades, he crafted his craft, and well known, and raised a family, and put a son or two through medical school. It's just amazing that our country is built on the backbones of immigrants. Non-traditional records. Time goes by. Non-traditional records, and I'll clear it. So family recipes, yearbooks, and newspapers. So there are a couple different websites. We have, these are recipes. Can I do that without? No, they won't let us. Okay. So Family Search, the recipes here, among other things, you can just Google older recipes. But it's great here because you can get recipes for like a couple 100 years old or something more recently. But it's so important, as I lost a dear friend who was 91 several weeks ago, and so we're going through her things, and her lemon bars have been her, I don't know, everyone in the church always was, you wish we had the recipe. She never gave it to anyone. And she said she was going to give it to my husband because she adored my husband. And she died kind of unexpectedly, so we're going through her many, many wonderful recipes to find that lemon bar recipe, because there's nothing ever made since then is ever compared. So now we're at home, my sons, and we're all trying to repeat that lemon bar recipe. But it's such an amazing thing to share with family, to share your legacy. I've heard some people, I don't know, it's a teaspoon, or it's a this, that. People don't know, especially the older generation, they didn't have to measure. They just figured out it was this much or this much to do for that. So, writing down that information for your children and your children's children is so important to do. Oh. Good food has a way of bringing families together. Anytime family gathers to eat, it's a family history moment. Here's some of these recipes. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through those, but there's some famous, there's ones that are actually, you can get, they're posted since 1908. You could get on there and find out more things. Margaret, my friend Margaret, she actually did many clippings rather, from the newspaper and magazines, very common. Yearbooks. Yearbooks, so many are online these days. This is my husband's father. And we were astounded at what we found. Here's a guy, he's an Italian, 5'6", probably at his greatest height. And this is the basketball team over there at 5'6". It was really great. And this is what he posted in there. Many interests for it, shows it in his work in football, basketball teams, and his sports, all related, and he goes on. This is his college yearbook. Newspapers in the details. It's I really want to show you this one. Where's my, I have my pointer working. Why is the pointer not working? Okay, for the sake of time. So this one I found a clipping. This is, it was like early 1900s. 49 become citizens in Berks County, Pennsylvania. I was going to open up for the full clipping, but 49 new Americans were created yesterday, almost in a twinkling of an eye, at the naturalization court. Here's my husband's ancestors, the Carabellos, Biagio, and it gives us his address, which now, that address I found on all the census records. So I know this Benjamin, or Biagio Carabello, because there's so many, I can find in the census records, because he lived at 338 South 3rd Street. So it's great that I know this guy is the guy I'm looking for on a certain census record. But it goes on, it gives all their names. But it's like, this is a great piece of information. Newspapers are an under-tapped source. And I'm not gonna look at that one. This one will, these are the two other Carabellos. So this is one of the two sons. Both became, Natal became brothers, he became a physician. So did his brother over here, both. This guy here was like for 4 years when, I think in the summers in between medical school, he was the picnic guru. They actually had like a job to be the picnic guy. So here it says 127,000 attended 186 recreational bureau statistics. And when I open up this whole article, it goes on and on and on about this guy and about his life and what he's doing next and the medical school and what's he doing. It just goes on. It's like an incredible piece of information. But who would have known? Picnics are making the news back then. And here over here is Natal. He both ended up being very famous physicians down in Philadelphia. But you get a lot of information down here. During the summers of 1930 and 1931, Dr. Carabello was a playground leader at Millmont and in the city park and his hobbies, and it goes on to talk about great information from the newspapers. Obituaries, another one we love to see because it gives us where they were living, residents when he died, the wives, the parents' names. Like this guy here was an Army veteran, so now I know I'm going to go looking for military records from this guy because he was a veteran here. Mind you, those that provide the information for newspapers, maybe they don't know all the information, or maybe they might be a little incorrect. So keep that in mind when you're looking through newspapers. Famous watch case. So I'm not going to open up the link. I had to do some research on for someone in Topsfield. And as I got into this Fortenbach and learned about him, he was an immigrant from Germany. He ended up being a patent maker for a watch case. And it went on and on about his death and about his life, and it was amazing. And I was able to pull up at the U.S. Patent Office his patent for the watch case. It was amazing. But they had the Fortenbach watch case factory, employed 500 people. It was incredible. I think this was New Jersey. He had 4 sons. He's survived by 3 daughters. He was cremated. You know, you get the picture. It gives us a lot of information. Oh, a few family websites. So because of time, I'm going to go over 2 of them. Google. People underestimate Google. And Google is like a wonderful thing. There's Google. You can Google in general, and then you can Google and then choose books or choose images if you want to choose books. So I chose books. I wanted to know what was going on. I know my family up in New York were kind of famous. They had a Dean Hotel, so I thought there's got to be something up there. Sure enough. My great-great-great-grandfather is here. He was a Lounsbury, found out a lot of information. But here, in this book called The History of Putnam County in New York, it gives this biographical sketch of this guy. So I got an incredible amount of information. Because part of the information that's in there, I was able to his daughter married this guy who's also in this book. So over here is more of the obituary. Again, for the sake of time, I don't want to get into that. But it was like, Google is like amazing. One time, for a friend of mine, I wanted to show her how powerful Google was. I only used Google to do her family history. Very quickly, I was able to find out her great father or grandfather. Left Germany, came to the United States, ended up going back, that's where he died. But it was all on just Googling and finding that, that information there. Not going to Family Search, not going to anything else. Just Googling, right? Here, books. Google is going crazy at putting books online. This dean, so I was able to trace my ancestors back to the Revolutionary War, where my Irish ancestor came over and fought in the Revolutionary War, and I only know he died. I have to verify when he did, but like almost nothing I know. I find out there's this little blurb about the deans, which is my maiden name. And then there's this book all on this. It was like amazing that you can, again, Google is reproducing some of these. You can actually, I can order this same book that they can send me just like a newer copy that they're just doing. And I did that for the Burnhams. Way back then, you couldn't do that. Family Search, we'll go over it quickly. Where I'm from, all about me. Once you create an account, it's free. You just have to register online. That's all you have to do. It doesn't cost you anything. It's one of the largest sites of having many, I think it's over 5 billion records in Family Search. Anyone can join there. But once you start adding your tree, it creates this amazing piece of information, where they serve. Cemetery tools that it takes you. It's like literally like feeding you breadcrumbs to help you connect to your ancestors. So you can find it. They're connected to that. They help you to work through like cemeteries and find that information. Cemeteries your relatives are in. This is also on Family Search. This is what mine looks like. I was like, what the heck, Australia? Like, oh, there it goes. I have relatives in Australia, but this is connected to my tree. So this is why it's showing me, because I have all this. It's the world's largest family tree. It's great. The mobile apps that you can do on your own phone, this is great. Download Family Search mobile apps called Family Tree and Family Tree Memories. So the tree that gives you record hints of like, hey, we found this might be your ancestors. Check it out, open it up. Allows you to attach it right there on your phone or on your computer. Memories app allows you to upload photos, videos. You had a conversation that's taped, not video, taped. You can upload the taped version that you just talked with your granddaughter about. Upload all those things to save for the next generation. Makes it easy, makes it convenient to be able to share our lives. For the sake of time, sorry I had to rush through all those. So it's 2 o'clock again, I'm sorry that I kind of went. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know I wasn't able to cut
Do hospitals keep records, or is that?
They do, but they're under the more of a privacy law, medical law. So census records are every 72 years. So every 72 years, they're putting on a census, they're putting out the census for public. So they want to, so you're not, our recent one is 1950. You won't see the 1960 until like 72 years from now. So hospitals, they do have records. I was able to find one of my ancestors was at Danvers State Hospital. And it gives quite a bit of information, but we're talking early 1900s. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that the railroad has a lot of
Yes.
information. I need to go out searching with the railroad.
Good question. If you just Google railroad records, it will bring up like some suggestions. Family Search, there's a way you can look under a catalog, like I was hoping to be able to do that, a catalog. You can look under subject, under railroad. Like when I was trying to look for Italy, you know, I didn't know, I was like, okay, how about this and this, and I was able to get there. So railroad, especially in America, where we have much better, you know, record keeping, you can look on Family Search, and there's other websites. Usually the railroad industry itself has those records, and they've probably put them in some database. There's so many different databases. I never use one. I use Ancestry and Family Search and at least a dozen more, at least, to be able to do that. But start by Googling, railroad records. But look at what you're looking at. Be careful, you can get down, because ads are always added to, you know, when you're searching. So you gotta just make sure whatever you're looking at is, okay, that looks like a government kind of thing, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Have you ever found that after a certain number of years, cemeteries have resold grave sites?
I haven't yet, but I've heard of that. Yeah, and I think sometimes you've got to be careful with cemeteries. I think sometimes Find a Grave is so quick to put up information before some families actually know about death. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know a lot about it to really speak of it. But I know you can, like billion-dollar graves, or not billion graves. You can actually go to the cemetery, use your phone, it was on the app, and you take pictures and you upload it, and you can help contribute to that worldwide thing that there's so many things that are missing, so many graves. So you can do that yourself, but to speak specifically, I don't know.
Thank you. Undertaker records. I mean, and over the years I've looked into the funeral parlors that these people were buried from. And they
Yeah.
have sent me back letters saying, oops, sorry, we can't give you that information. I don't know why, but, you know, whether it was a time span or what.
So it could be, you should ask them next time. Because New York, if you want to get anything from New York, you need, you know, a bloodline pedigree of just one generation. They're notorious. You can't get records from there. So I would ask why. Why do they not? They might just have one of those, we don't give it for genealogical purposes. And maybe they do give it for genealogical, but they want to know, like, how are you related to
Right.
this person?
Okay.
And the second part is how far out. That they might be more hesitant to give it to you, like that's 10 years or 20 years.
But even local, you know, like places down, Undertaker's down, funeral parlors down in Reading.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I go back just say 50 years, and I wrote to them, and it's still by the same family, so to speak.
Yeah.
But they say, no, can't. I said, I'm the, you know,
Ask what their policy is.
okay.
Maybe you got a guy who's new, like, yeah, no, not doing that, because they're, you know, the younger generation are like, yeah, not sharing that, you know. So find out what their policy is. Again, you could have just had a new guy.
Okay.
What about adoption records? They're supposed to be sealed.
They are. There are some that are not sealed, but it has to do with the original contract of that person that says, I'm okay with it being unsealed after X amount of years. Some say it's okay for limited, but yeah, that's like a sticky wicket, I guess you could call it. Depends on the state of what their laws are, of what they're going to allow for adoption records. And then it also has to do with whatever that contract is, that person, they maybe don't want ever to know that I gave up my daughter. Like they don't ever want it to know. So that's a little tougher. There's more coming online, there's more availability as we try to dissect that really muddy water to help families find the next connection. Yeah, good question. Other questions?
My brother-in-law went into the city of Boston to get his birth certificates of his and my sister's. Got the birth certificate. He said, well, I'm here and I also got the marriage certificate. Clerk came back, you're not married. The priest forgot to send the information from the marriage in Boston.
That must have been a real eye-opener.
Oh, yeah.
That was incredible. Yeah, some of the things you find out about, the various records, and now with DNA being so popular, and finding out, like, no, there's no connection between you and what does that mean?
So I said,
They're out there.
I
That's
said to my
interesting.
sister, you've been living in sin for the last 25 years.
Yeah, and way back in the earlier, 20th century here, if you were married, at least from the Italians of my ancestors, if you were married by a JP, that's not real marriage. So they wanted to make sure they got, and years later, they got a church wedding. So, but that was important to them. They'd never consider. So,
But see, they were married by the state.
yeah, even though it's legal.
They were married.
Right, exactly. It wasn't illegal, but for them, and maybe the way they were brought
By the
up.
God.
Yes, right, you're not married, yeah, good point. Other questions or comments? That's a real interesting one.
She had an uncle.
Oh, he's throwing you under the bus.
Just drop it. Over the bus.
He was on immigration, he was supposed to go out of the country, pick up a prisoner. They couldn't find his birth records. So they had a baptism for him.
Oh, really? There's
A big
great,
party.
awesome stories to hear. This is so
Oh, yeah.
important for your next generation, like that don't know this. This is so important to write this down. So important. I learned so much when I was taking a couple of my classes, talking to my husband about his. I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And it was only because I had to write it down. Write it down. Share it with your next generation. Sharing just recipes is a great way when next time you're with your children and your children's children, of sharing, like, let's try this, let's try, recipes. Start somewhere, connecting with the next generation. Too much is lost in between generations, especially where even 50 years ago, the internet was not even like compared to our ancestors. So please try to, pass that incredible wealth of history that is inside your brain onto the next generation.
And label your photographs.
Yes, my friend who passed away, she labeled a lot, there were so many that weren't. But it was, you know, we're going through, she actually in her will, willed her genealogy, all her stuff to my husband and I. As we go through it, she went to Italy and got records, as we go through and finish it, then we can give it to her family, because that's where it belongs. We just don't want it to get lost in a box somewhere. So, yeah, she really, it's a great thing to have. Make a family tree, we're making it easier and easier to do.
Couple
Yes.
things. So people back in the day used to write things in their Bibles, so they had
Yeah.
family history in the Bibles, and they would keep death records in their Bibles, or little burial cards of families.
That's a great thing, because they have those online. I know at least a Family Search, but they do it other ones. People have made, they've uploaded the Bible records,
Yeah.
photographs of the front of these family generations, and it's amazing. Yeah, good point. Yeah,
So the Church of Latter-day Saints in Lynnfield,
yeah.
do they have records that we can't find online, generally? Is it the same going there as it would be to go to Utah?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So, for me, when I've had to look at my ancestral records, so much you can do in your own home, but there's still records that whoever owns them, say it's the Italian, whatever, they don't want me to access those birth records of 1850 at home. It's a contractual agreement between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Italian government. Some websites are like just whatever, but that's not uncommon to the LDS website. It's also Ancestry. So to get to your question, it will say you cannot access those records. You have to go to a family history center.
Okay.
So I'd have to go to the Lynnfield one,
Yeah.
and then I'll be able to see it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go to Utah.
You don't have to order them.
No, we stopped ordering them a long time ago.
That's awesome.
And anything that's not on the internet, we've kept in our library
Okay,
there.
so right now, Family Search has my area of Italy for birth records, marriage records, death records, but I heard from somewhere that those are going away online through Family Search, so it must be what the contract thing you're talking about. But I'll still be able to access them in Lynnfield?
On their computer.
On their computers?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have about 300 films left of 3,000 that we have to keep in the library, because my husband and I have checked every single one to make sure they're accessible on a computer.
Okay.
At the library or at home.
Okay, great.
So we keep an Excel spreadsheet. So once they're like out for the public, you know, either at the library or not, then we're sending it back
Okay.
there. Yeah, it's great. Not just our LDS library. there's one in Georgetown.
Anywhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although Utah would be a nice place to go.
Yeah.
Where?
Utah.
It is. That library is what I call my mothership.
Family Tree, I think, or maybe it's Ancestry is offering a trip out there with all the, classes and that.
Yeah, there's like some great ancestral kind of businesses that are offering these guided things. They go up, help you with that. They have everyone there volunteers in that library, so they're willing to help. And again, I don't just use Family Search because not all records are on there. There's Ancestry.com is amazing as well as other. I mean, those are my two top. Pardon?
And Ancestry.com.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes, they both are. Yeah, they really are. They have a lot, but I find they don't have this. I'm looking in the other one.
And Internet Archive.
Internet
Internet
Archive.
Archive is a free source
Yep.
that has a lot of, especially yearbooks and.
Yes, it does. And also, at the library, at the Lynnfield Library, you can access Ancestry and other premium websites that you would have to pay if you wanted to get them at home. So we get them in the library does. We get them free at the library through there. So and Family Search is free anyway. You can set one up at your home. But all the other ones that cost, the premium websites we call it, like Find a Grave, Ancestry.com, those are all free through the library out in Lynnfield, or any LDS library.
But it is a smart thing to ask an older people things, because my mother came here to marry my father, and she could not get off the boat until my father married her. And we would have never found that out if it wasn't for my mother's girlfriend who told me.
Wow.
And when I came home, my mom said to me, "Oh, for goodness sakes." And my brother said to her, "Mom, that is very romantic. Do you think so?" So my brothers and sisters, I told them, and it is, we think it's very romantic. And you should share with your children these things.
It's
Because
so
otherwise,
important.
they're not gonna ever find out.
Yeah, and Family Search is the largest public tree, ancestry, and I get it, there's pros and cons to it. So in Family Search, I could see your tree, you could see mine. But there, you can write a little history or whatever, you can contribute to that story. That's like a great piece of information.
It is great.
Oh
We
my,
love it. We
yes,
love it.
that is so good. One of my friends, and I'll finish up because I'm so sorry I'm taking time. I was trying to find some friends of mine. I said, I want just one name. I want an interesting, and it kind of went through our congregation. Just one name. Tell me one name. And so I got all these amazing stories about just like one ancestor. One of my friends, she said I forgot which one of her relatives, missed the boat for the Titanic.
Oh,
Yeah, you know what that is. Wow. He is here because he missed the boat. He was late. Like that sends shivers at night. So that's like a cool piece of information. And I love collecting that piece of information. People that are you just don't hear that often.
Yeah, 1912.
Yeah, what he said.
Maybe before my time.
Yeah. Other questions?
Comment that you said about changing the name. They got to New York and the name was like Goldberg, and he said, you might want to change the name, and he said, how about take the Berg off? And she goes, oh, I like Berghoff. So she changed the name from Goldberg to Berghoff. So how would somebody find your relative? That would be a roadblock to a family tree, wouldn't it?
Yes and no.
Don't totally changing the name?
Yeah, it can be, but you just got to know, like, okay, it's Berghoff. Okay, now I'm looking for the records of these whatever. That maybe now show the marriage, or maybe he was a family of 5. Now I'm looking at the other 5 siblings that have the original name. Or I'm going back and saying, okay, there's the birth record of the child that has the original name. You know, there's other ways of getting around that to say that Berghoff is really my Goldberg, or whatever it is. There, you got to be able to like triangulate, you know, I guess the different records, looking at what the record is, where it came from, and who provided that information. Not just a book, which, you know, we have plenty of books, but you got to like, okay, where did they get that information? Nowadays, everything is cited. I got it from this, you know, it's like you can prove it. So, you know, got to be able to prove that to have it
I think typewriters improved it because handwriting, the A and the O on the end of the name got changed.
Learning how to read Italian handwriting, the A's, the O's, the E's. Seriously?
And you also have to remember, during the census, people used to go around to these different places at the houses and do the census. So it's not whether the person's name is right, it's how the person taking the information, writes it down. Or if Mrs. Smith isn't home, you know, in apartment 3A, you know, 3B comes out and says, oh, I can give you all the information, and all that information could be wrong.
Yeah, exactly true. That's exactly true. They knock on the door and it's a non-speaking, non-English speaking. So there's some, they try real hard to get it right, but I've read multiple, examples of like, oh, they retired at the end of the day and they just, some of the census records were maybe a little more sketchier people and, you know, whatever. So yeah, that's a good point.
So if somebody hits a roadblock and if they're doing this, actually, how expensive is the hobby? How expensive could it be?
Could be very. Very.
All right, so before I got it, I'd go to the library to get an ancestor. I paid $300 a year for theirs because I have Irish and Italian. So if I just wanted America, it'd be $100. But I go to the library and there's contractual agreements between the church and Ancestry, so a lot of the members have that for free. And Find a Grave is part of Ancestry, and Family Search is all free. But it just depends. I mean, I spend good money, but there's a lot of free stuff. Roots Web is a part of Ancestry that's free. So Roots Web is a portion, it's like Ancestry, just not the fuller thing. But that's the free portion of Ancestry.com, Roots Web. You don't see that often.
All right, so-
But there's a lot, you can Google Family Tree Magazine, I subscribe to that, it'll say 8 free websites, things you never heard of. Cindy's List, CYNDI, it's like Craigslist, but Cindy's List, it's a plethora of information for genealogy. It's just amazing. There's a John Grisham, he's a lawyer, he put all this, his website, it's literally like breadcrumbs leading you to the specific year you want to look at or the record. It's amazing still. And there's a lot of free conferences now that the pandemic's really winding down. That conferences, all, you take a class for half a day or it's about learning. It's just about learning about getting through some brick walls, like the name thing.
All right,
No,
so it's
looking
not
at-
absolutely free, and if you hit a roadblock, you could end up going to Lynnfield, like say I get so far and then I hit a roadblock and I walk into the library in Lynnfield, they would help me?
Yeah, we would.
Yeah,
I
okay.
know. I know, so the original, well, I was there for 16 years and then someone took over so I could serve in a different capacity. So she's actually moving to Utah, so I think I'm gonna be the director. So she's had to close for the pandemic, literally, we don't. So we've been meeting one-on-one with people. So before we had regular hours, we're moving to get back to that, to have people come in, still
You
trying
meet
to.
one-on-one with people?
I do.
So if somebody has a roadblock, they could come to you and try to figure it out with you?
Yes.
For a cost?
No, I don't
No?
charge
Wow.
for anything.
Wow.
No, we do not charge at the
Wow, wow, wow.
library. Mind you, we're not gonna do your genealogy, we'll help
Right.
you do your genealogy.
Right.
Like showing a man how to fish, right? Instead of giving him the fish you just caught. Yeah, so I don't charge.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I've done a lot of pro bono stuff, I have my certificate in, and I've done a lot of, it just brings a lot of joy. I don't know, I think if I got paid, it would just be too stressful. I'm a nurse, it's stressful enough. I work in oncology, but it's fine. Yeah.
Did you already cover, maybe I missed it, that when, like say, my grandparents came from Avellino, Italy.
Mm.
Now, when they came to Boston, they didn't go Ellis Island, they came here to Boston.
Yeah.
But when, now, this doesn't pertain to them, but I want to know, some of the immigration officials, if I said I was from Avellino, they would say, okay, your last name is Avellino.
Yeah, that
Is
can,
that true?
it can be, yeah, it is. But for the most part, getting off the boat, they really try to get the accurate name. They really do. I can't say how often that would happen. Because
Can I
before,
ask-
like they did that for occupation. Like you were Jane's shoemaker, because
Well, see, my
your father was a shoemaker.
Yeah.
Right, so the other ports, so New York, Boston, New Orleans, and I'm missing off the top of my head, there's other ports that, pardon, Philadelphia, thank you. They were the other ports that the immigrants came into as well. Yep.
Can I address that a little bit? What I've heard from like genealogy shows online and whatnot, is that the people who wrote those records of the people coming into port were Italians in Italy. They wrote the records in Italy. So the chances of the name getting changed on that record are less likely. But then when they go to get naturalized, or they have something here that they have to fill out, and they hit an American person who didn't understand the language, that's when most of the names
That's
got
what got
changed.
messed up.
Right, right. My family included. It was when my grandfather got naturalized, not when, the name was right on his record
Mine is
coming
too.
over. Right.
So the good thing about the good and bad, naturalization records, bad being what you just said. So it usually took people at least 5 years to get naturalized. So you got the first naturalization record is getting off the boat. That ship manifest, they usually have one leaving Italy, and then they'd have a ship manifest of coming into America. So you have that ship manifest. Then you have your declaration. I'm declaring I want to be a United States citizen. And then your intent to naturalize, and then it's usually you have to live here for about a year in the United States, and then when you go before the full court and get that stamp, you're naturalized, and then you get your certificate. That's usually almost 5 years later after you've arrived to America. So luckily there's
But a whole
the
bunch-
intention, the declaration, so you might be able to cross over different records to verify some of the names.
But a whole bunch came over in World War I. If they served in World War I, they got naturalized automatically when World War I ended. It was like a perk to join the army.
Yeah.
So if you were Italian and joined the American Army in World War I, in 1918, you'll find one day where all of those soldiers became natural. The paperwork was processed for it,
Yeah,
just because they served.
just wonderful. I'm glad we
My
did that.
husband came over,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he.
I got a hard one. Definitely a.
We're out of time, sorry.
Sorry, that's why I waited till last
okay.
possible. My grandmother was born in some part of Russia because I got some records, but they're all in 1900s Russia. So it's a slightly different Cyrillic
Yeah.
that the people I know now who do Russian go, I don't know what this means.
Yeah, different dialect. you
Yes.
know? Even go to New Orleans, it's a different dialect, or
Mhm.
French.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there any way to find this out?
absolutely. So what I find really helpful is familysearch.org/wiki.
Mhm.
So you've heard of like the wiki. So the
Yeah.
wiki is like, it's like an online encyclopedia, right? You can find almost anything about a wiki. Family Search Wiki is specific for genealogy. It's amazing. So it doesn't have all the, it's 45 degrees latitude and 6 degrees from the equator, or whatever it is, which you can find on the regular wiki. Family Search Wiki gives you so much information. It'll tell you that kind of thing. So it was, in Russia they had this, and therefore it was this, and there's a lot of information specific to genealogy. That's I still use that. When I teach people, when I'm with people and working with people, I say, you've got to get an account for Family Search and use the wiki. Yeah, and because I still use it. And people can contribute to that as well. It's amazing. So it also helps determine what's online, what's not online. It's not all inclusive. Second thing, it also helps you with links or to learn the transcribing of ancient language or older ones. I took a class in paleography, which is reading ancient language in different ones. So that was 4 months of learning from 1500s all the way from England, where you can't understand anything. So it's learning that, but you can probably find that in the wiki, some kind of like learn how to, and in Family Search, there's a little question mark at the top, there's a learning center. I use that all the time, like learning, I would put in Russian language and it would come up all these articles, or they have free online, like an hour long, 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long, all these free classes, everything's free on Family Search. Roots Tech is, it's once a year, and we had it virtual, it's throughout the entire world. They now have one in England. That's not free, but you can access all that content. It's a conference for genealogy. But there's people present about stuff like that. So in that, getting on that Family Search and typing in learning Russian, it can give you a wealth of information and probably narrow down to where you need.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Other questions? It was great to be here and talk with you guys. Thank you. But we're all good. Thank you. You're welcome.